I was very fortunate that I had the influences that, to my mind, now people sometimes don't realize how valuable they were in the whole development of that subcontinent, of men who were the kind of politicians who had two streams of thought at their highest level, their own indigenous culture and the Western mind coming through their education, through everything. Contacts with the English, I still remember, with also those same kind of people, naturally. My father's greatest friend was an Englishman who owned one of the big hotels at the time. He was a barrister. He'd drive to our house with a carriage and pair sort of thing. Spoke the most beautiful Urdu. Could recite Persian poetry, as everybody did, because the classical poetry was always with Persian background. He said to me, oh, but partition had to come because, you see, look, there would have been tremendous rioting. I said, the English said that. But you have had wars between sovereign countries. Is that better or worse than rioting? No, there was no great unified structure in that subcontinent before the British made it happen. But once it was there, had there not been this vociferous movement and the same strength, as I say, put into scene, we wouldn't have had the tragedies of today. About the books, I always wanted to write. I wrote short stories when I was at the college, and one was published in the collection. I still remember. Why I remember it, it's amusing, is because all of us had to write these stories. And then they were read out in class. And at one point, one of my very close friends, she'd written a story. And I giggled at one point, which was sort of romantic and sentimental. And the teacher, who was an American with a very severe face, looked at me and said, and why are you laughing? And I said, well, it was a bit sentimental, wasn't it? She said, if there had been more sentiment in your story, it would have improved it. But I always wanted to. And they'd go round and round in my head, and sometimes I'd put them down and sometimes I wouldn't. And they were published, some of them, in papers or magazines in India in those early years. Then they kept on at me that you've got to write a novel, and anybody else with any sense, any ambitious person would have killed themselves and gone and hidden in a country place, but I had to work. I was also, as I say, by now suffering deeply from this homesickness. I did go back in 1951 to India for, I recorded stuff, and I went back for a month or 6 weeks because I had begun to lose hair, which falls out with nervousness and unhappiness, and the specialist said, "This, why is she here? She's obviously a very unhappy person here." Well, so I came back cured and full of thoughts again. And I began to realize I had to write that other book that I had promised Chattos, not that I did the second and third ones, but I sat down to write that. I'd work, then I'd go off and sit in the country where I had a friend and stay with her, and she looked after me and shoved the food near the door, and I'd go on. Then there'd be a gap because I couldn't go on. Then I'd pick it up in the strangest places. That book was written in Rahim Yar Khan, which was then like a Wild West outpost. I wanted to write about that agonizing heartbreak when we were all split up and a brother could not see a brother, and a mother could not be with her dying son. And families that had been proud to always collect together when there were weddings or deaths or births or anything cannot be together. And I couldn't write it, and I wrote this book and was dissatisfied with it. But I handed it in to the agent, and she was delighted and said that the person who was editing it and looking after it was Cecil Day Lewis. Well, I mean, I couldn't have dreamt of such a thing happening. I, who had read his poems and been, as I told you, that girl in my school reading all these people and wanting so much later on when I grew older and went to the university to meet poets and writers, that it should be Cecil Day Lewis involved with this. She said, he has actually said that it's very autobiographical. I enjoyed finding the core of an idea and finding that a sentence does not need so many words and a thought does not need that. And I did that, and it was published. The last chapters of it are almost as if I've condensed what I would have done in the next one, because it is as if she has come back to her home after the partition. But the in-between has gone of the actual, as I say, the pain of that partition for most of us who were left behind. And sad to think that now the ones who are there, they might be rich, as they would never have been. They might have become generals when they would have been only lieutenants. But they have also felt the pain of not being accepted totally. And sometimes it makes me angry when any of them question me from either side of that partition and say, oh, you living in England, what would you know? In the first place, I know more than they do because I have to identify much more because I'm challenged the whole time. My identity is. Also, they do not know that added to their pain of separation and uprooted feelings, which they shouldn't have in Pakistan, they should have become part of it by now. He had the most incredibly charming smile. And he smiled very often. I mean, I remember him as that I'd keep on arguing, he'd keep on. He was, after all, a tremendously good lawyer. And who was I? Good God, I was about 20-something, you know? And he would smile and try and convince me and say that I was wrong and give me all the reasons. Which were these? That, that the Muslims had no chance in a universal sort of... he had the other side, as I told you, the very private side. My husband knew more of that because he went and stayed there with Raja Sahib. Raja Sahib, he was Raja Sahib's guardian, and Raja Sahib was like his son until they had some differences of opinion, because Raja Sahib was much more revolutionary against the British than Mr. Jinnah wanted to be. He wanted to be more diplomatic about it and move step by step. Then when I had gone to Matharan once, and he'd been very ill, and he was there recuperating, I went to see him. And I wish then I had one of these tape recorders. He was so human. He was telling me about how, and Miss Jinnah was there with him. She was always with him. And we were sitting there, and he said, when I first came to Matharan, I came up here, and I rang up and said I wanted a room in the hotel. And the man who owned it was absolutely in a state of terrible anxiety and said, it's very difficult. We can't give you a room in the main hotel. And he was laughing and saying it's because the English wouldn't want him there, you see. So he said, I can give you a room in the cottages and you'll be very comfortable there. But he was relating this with absolutely, without any kind of anger or making fun or anything, but tremendous humor when he was relating the story, how when he was young and he'd gone up like that and he thought, good heavens, I'm not going back down that hill again.